Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm Sarah, and this is Alyssa. And today we are here to talk about pain, especially arthritic pain. Alyssa is a doctor of physical therapy, and she has kindly offered to share some wisdom on how to deal with arthritis from a holistic perspective, a natural perspective. Not so long ago, we did a live on pain management with meditation and breathing techniques. That's in her group. And I think I put a link on my group as well. So that's kind of like the companion to this live. So let's go ahead and get started. We're using StreamYard today. So you need to give StreamYard permission to post a comment. If you have any questions as we go through the live, if you catch us live, start to say hello. If you catch the replay, just hit hashtag replay. And here we go. Alyssa, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do to start?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Sarah mentioned, I am a doctor of physical therapy. I've been practicing for a few years now. And I recently had started a business in the past year called Keep the Adventure Alive. So, I actually transplanted here from the Midwest a little less than a year ago and realized that there is so much adventure here. I mean, there's hiking, skiing, biking. We have been doing all of that since we came here. And one of the biggest things and one of the biggest goals I have is to show people and prove to people that adventure doesn't have an age limit and age doesn't have to dictate what you can do. Because so often when I used to work in home care, I would see people who would just kind of succumb to their pain and just kind of take a back seat to it, to the point where they could barely even walk around their house. And coming out here, it's when you're sitting in your house and you're looking up at the mountains, I want to be able to show you that you can actually, incorporate adventure into your life. And adventure doesn't necessarily have to be like climbing mountains or anything like that. It's just what makes you happy. And you should be willing and you should be able to do that. Because so often I see that people just kind of accept pain as normal, and then they just, decide that they can't do those things anymore. So I primarily help people get back to hiking, skiing, biking, especially if they are dealing with chronic joint pain or have a diagnosis of osteoarthritis.
Cool. Thanks for that intro. So today we're going to kind of focus on two things. One is movement and the other one is nutrition and foods that help, right? So start wherever you like.
Yes. So when approaching a diagnosis, whether you have a diagnosis of osteoarthritis or not, any sort of chronic joint pain that's lasting longer than 6 months, kind of falls into this category. So a lot of times what happens is when we start to have joint pain or when we start to feel, our knees aching or anything like that, our first instinct is to stop moving. Our first instinct is to rest because we think that if we rest our joints, then they will just feel better. And that is one of the biggest misconceptions that I see and educate people on all the time, because rest is honestly making your pain worse in situations of chronic joint pain. Now, if you have an injury or, anything like that, rest is kind of vital to that. But when we have chronic joint pain, rest is actually making our pain worse. Because when you're not moving and when you're inactive, your joints become stiff, they become weaker, and then we start to collect more inflammation.
So now that's a cycle, right? So then it gets worse. So then you don't want to move again. So then it gets worse.
Exactly. You get into this vicious cycle, then it's really hard to get out of.
But I don't blame people for not wanting to move. I mean, it hurts to move, right? So how do you get around that?
And that's why it's super important to really kind of invest in finding a healthcare professional you trust, whether it's a physical therapist, whether it's a rheumatologist, whether it's a primary care doctor, or even now there are lots of different options available to us, like a concierge medicine doctor. There are a functional medicine doctor. There are so many options out there. And so first, I always tell people, just find a healthcare professional that you trust. For example, like if you try traditional physical therapy and you just leave every time in more pain, it's torture to go, then find someone else. I mean, it's not that we have, and not everyone is different and everyone has a different approach. And so find someone that you really click with. And then I think that is the biggest thing, because then you go down, finding pain-free movement and all of these things. But kind of the first step is just finding someone that you can trust to give you the right information, because there's a lot of misinformation.
So I hear you, right? But a lot of the times we don't know what we're looking for. And I run into this when, people are looking for a spiritual teacher, and what are you looking for? Like someone that you click, yes, that's nice. But is there any green flags that say if someone does this, they know what they're doing? If someone does that, be mindful, they might not know what they're doing.
No, that's an awesome question. And I think a lot of the times if we go to, or if you find someone or just having a chat with the medical professional that you're with, anyone that tells you to stop moving, to continue resting, anyone that's really pushing surgery, pushing more pain medications, and not giving you the natural options. And I think that's what a lot of times we find is we kind of think surgery is the only option because that's all we're told. Some people aren't even told, like, movement is possible. Some people aren't even told, try increasing physical activity or even the nutrition route. So some people don't even know that. And so if you're not given options and you just feel like you're kind of given one option of surgery or pain medications or seeing someone for 5 minutes and then not explaining your condition, I think is a big part, because when you're dealing with chronic pain, education is huge. And sometimes we're not given the time to ask questions. We're not, given any sort of explanation. So then you go to Google and you start typing things in, and then you start going down this rabbit hole of fearing movement and, not knowing what to do. So if someone is only giving you like one option, or if someone isn't explaining your condition or answering your questions, I think those are two red flags, because there are specialists out there, and and that's one of the reasons why I started to specialize in osteoarthritis, because there's not enough information out there and people aren't getting the information that they need, and then they're being told not to move. The wear and tear condition is not true. There's a lot more to that. So another red flag is if you're told that your condition is from wear and tear from running too much when you were younger, that's also a red flag, because that's not completely true.
Interesting. So speaking of options, and I'm going to put in a plug for your YouTube channel here, because I follow your YouTube channel, and every time I see you, and I like to watch it because I'm a fitness teacher, right? Like yoga, yes, it's a spiritual practice, but at the end of the day, it's movement, it's exercise. So I like to educate myself a little, and I see in you a professional whom I can trust and kind of listen. So I follow your YouTube channel, and one of the things that I see you do all the time is you give people so many options for the same exercise. Yeah. Why do you do that? Why is it important that a professional does that and gives you that many options, not just in regards to what you say about holistic plus conventional approaches to everything, pain management, inflammation, and all of that, but also in regards to the exercises themselves?
So, because a lot of times everyone is at a different stage. Some people, have pain doing certain movements. Some people don't really have pain doing that same movement. And osteoarthritis and joint pain is just such a wide spectrum. We have to kind of be willing to show people that there are different options, because when you just have one approach, so one way of doing something, someone can do it with, if they have knee osteoarthritis, whatever, it's mild, they can do it just fine. But then another person with maybe a little bit more progressive knee arthritis, maybe they've had some other back issues or something, can look at the same exercise, try to do it, have more pain, and then become frustrated. And then that frustration leads to kind of moving away from exercise in general. And so I always like to provide lots of different options, not only just for, modifications of exercises and things like that, but there's so many exercises out there and so many ways to do things. So for example, like, for aerobics, I mean, a lot of times people walk and they bike. Those are two common lower impact type things. But I want to show people like cardio kickboxing, other sorts of like aerobic movements that aren't necessarily the biking and walking, because we have to add variety. And so that's one of the things that I really try to show people, is that there is variety. And I just did a cardio kickboxing. That's why it's fresh in my mind. But there are other options, and you just have to find something that you like. And that's the biggest thing. And so having those options, having that variety, I think increases the possibility that you can find something that you like. Not just a certain, 5 exercises you need to do for knee osteoarthritis. You can use TRX bands, you can use dumbbells, you can do kickboxing, all of these different types of things are possible.
When you say that, dumbbells and kickboxing, I go, no, like that's not for me. But just for the record, the other day I saw you do a kickboxing class in a chair or something like that. Yeah. Do I recall correctly? And I was like, I never even knew that was a thing.
Oh yeah, there's all sorts of ideas. So I did a seated kickboxing routine, because again, seated exercises are more than just kicking your legs out in a chair. I mean, there's lots of different things that you can do. And so, if you can't tolerate standing exercises right now, then we can kind of kick it up a notch for the seated exercises that aren't just, kind of the boring things that you typically see.
I work with a chair a lot, and people think that chair is like senior yoga. And I'm like, I can so kick your butt on a chair. And especially if you have a limited range of motion, or for whatever reason, there's so many reasons, because it allows you to isolate movements and not compensate, right? Because you can actually maintain proper alignment. Another thing that I've seen you do is you kind of take a holistic approach. So in my experience, a knee issue isn't only a knee issue. It's often caused by a misaligned hip. It's often caused by other things, right? And I think that's super important when you're looking to create a routine. Can you talk a little bit about that? And also about, you have like a online thing that you do for, I think it's like $47 or something, where you give people exercises of different kinds. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So that is another common misconception. So like when you have knee pain and you go see your primary care, you go see an ortho doc, and you have a history of arthritis, they take an x-ray of your knee. But a lot of times the knee becomes weaker, or the knee moves differently. Different parts of the joint are more stressed than others because of hip weakness, because of potentially like a hip misalignment or a low back issue that's causing you to walk differently. So then your knee, the different parts of the joint are taking more force. And that's essentially kind of what leads to some of the osteoarthritis. And that's, I think, where some of that wear and tear originally came from, is that when you're loading one part of the knee more than the other, it's going to wear down a little bit quicker. Just like on a shoe, if you walk differently, parts of the shoe are more worn out than other parts. So that's kind of what essentially happens in your joint. It's much more complicated than that. But so that's why a lot of these things can play a part. And I commonly see that when people do have knee pain, for example, it is some sort of weakness in the hip. It is maybe one leg is a little bit weaker than the other. There's some imbalance that's leading to that pain, which is why, like, if you do have chronic pain, sometimes it's just in the right knee, or your right knee hurts worse than the left or something. So it's definitely, there are other contributors besides just the actual knee, and that gets missed a ton. And so that is one thing to really kind of keep in mind. If you are having pain somewhere, it's important to kind of have a full body approach to things, because it could be your ankle, it could be your foot, it could, lots of different things, but we only get x-rays of our knee. So that's kind of where a lot of people, I think, are misguided. And then it leads to premature surgery and things, because we're not actually addressing the issue. And then they think surgery is the only option. But then when they have surgery, the pain either comes back or doesn't necessarily fully go away. And the success is, a little bit up in the air. So it's definitely likely a full body problem. Somewhere along the chain, there is some sort of imbalance or some sort of asymmetry that can start to lead to pain.
And that's when you have that whole body workout thing that you have.
Yes. So that is what I found, is that a lot of people don't exercise when they have pain or when they have arthritis because they don't know what to do. And I mean, that's very, very common. Even just, in the general population, a lot of times we don't exercise just because we don't really know what to do. But especially when you throw pain into the mix, it's like, I don't want to further hurt my joint. I don't want to cause more damage. And so I have actually created a way where you can kind of pick your own workouts. And essentially, I have created a list of strength exercises, balance and core, and then a cardio routine. And essentially, you have 3 boxes. And in each box of those categories, you have 4 exercises to choose from. So when you go to plan your workout, you pull 1 exercise from each of those boxes, and then you do 3 to 4 rounds of it. So it's kind of an easy way. You still have some control over what exercises you want to do, but the options are limited. So you have to pick one, and you're getting the appropriate variety, but also that these exercises aren't going to increase your pain. They aren't going to make your pain worse. They aren't going to increase the damage. So you can have the confidence that when you're doing it, that this is what you should be doing.
So are you saying that these exercise syllabus, let's call it, it's specifically designed for a certain...
Well, so it's a full body approach, and it's specifically designed for people that have some sort of chronic joint pain or arthritis. But so, it ultimately be for, anyone, but it's primarily designed for people that are 50 and older. It does have a beginner, moderate, and advanced. So it kind of covers all fitness levels. And you can easily make things easier or harder, but it's primarily for those that are looking to kind of get into some sort of routine at kind of a lower entry fee, so that you can have some confidence that you're doing the right things. And that's
where do I find that? Can you post the link on the comments below at some point, either now or later, so that people can go and find this? Because that's very key, right? So when you're working with a professional that has experience, we look at the body from a certain perspective, right? And we look at movement from a certain perspective. So as I asked the question, your answer kind of gave me, these are simple, non-complex exercises, probably that only involve one joint at a time, as opposed to the movement of many joints at the time, which then minimizes the risk of injury because you're isolating with the exercises that you do. But you're right, when someone's trying to work out on their own, they don't know the difference. They don't know the difference between simple movement and complex movement, right?
Right. And one of the biggest things that I find is when people are dealing with pain, especially arthritis pain, they think walking is the only exercise that's safe. And the problem that we run into that is walking works the same muscles over and over and over again because you're moving just in the forward motion.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest thing that we find is that those muscles can get overworked, and the muscles that you're not working primarily when you're walking get neglected, and they can become weakened. Then you start to have some of those imbalances. And so this is kind of an easy way to incorporate some other exercises. These workouts are, ultimately meant to take 10 to 15 minutes. They're not meant to be, hour-long things, because you don't necessarily need that. But I always tell people, even if you are biking or walking primarily for exercise just because you like it, that's totally fine. But if we can add a couple of these exercises either before or after, you will get so much more out of the walking aspect and so much more joint pain relief versus if you just kind of do the same repetitive motion over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's so true because, you're missing rotation, you're missing lateral extension, you're missing abduction, you're missing so many things. And then the movement becomes inefficient and you end up with a lot of compensations, right? Because the outer muscles are weak, so they don't provide the support that you need. So then there are little compensations that come into play, then the pain gets worse. And it's a spiraling down situation.
It is. It truly is. And
where if you balance it and do the exercises holistically, your walking becomes more efficient and therefore more productive.
yes. And that's why a lot of the times yoga and things are effective with arthritis pain relief is because it offers that variety. It offers those different planes of movement. It offers working out those different muscles and things because it's all about variety. I mean, that is the biggest thing that you need if you are trying to move, exercise, live with arthritis is you have to add variety.
And I never knew that, right? Because I learned yoga just because I learned yoga. And when I did my first year of yoga teacher training, when I was leading the first yoga teacher training, I was blessed to have a student who was a physical therapist by trade. And she was looking at the poses from your point of view, right? After a while, she goes, I see why that works. It's like you basically do every movement in a different direction against gravity in different positions.
Exactly.
Because of that, it becomes very holistic and very healing. Okay, let's jump real quick towards food and nutrition. I know you have a whole video on YouTube that I found very interesting. And you don't have to go into that level of detail. They can catch it on YouTube if they want. But in a nutshell, what to eat and what not to eat. Can we start with what not to eat?
Yes. So arthritis and joint pain are primarily driven by inflammation, and inflammation can come in a variety of different ways, but primarily it's what we're fueling our bodies with. And a lot of times people think that you just need to exercise and then you can kind of eat whatever you want and pain will just go away, when that's really not the case. The food aspect of it is actually a very large part of it. Not only because it controls weight, which then leads to decreased mechanical stress on your joints, but then it also leads to decreased inflammation. So weight control is one thing, but it's also controlling the inflammatory levels. So certain foods are going to increase those inflammatory levels, and then certain foods are going to counteract them. So the inflammatory foods, just on a very, very superficial level, is the processed foods. So a lot of the times, the things you can find in the middle of the grocery store, so down the aisles. So crackers, cookies, all of that kind of stuff is going to drive up inflammation levels. And
even the good ones?
What was that?
Even the supposedly good natural ones?
The organic ones. Yes. So honestly, I think organic is a word that people just tack onto things and then assume it's healthy. A lot of times, like sugar-free things. Also, those things are sometimes, especially the sugar-free and fat-free and all of those stuff, are more packed with chemicals than anything. And so you always want to look at the ingredients. And if you can read and pronounce the ingredients on the nutrition facts label, then you're probably okay. But when you start getting into all of these fancy, crazy names, then it starts to get a little bit sketchy. And it's everything in moderation. It's not saying that you can't have any of these things, but it's in moderation. And after talking to a lot of people who are dealing with osteoarthritis or even rheumatoid arthritis, sugar is a really big contributor to flare-ups, so pain flare-ups. And it's primarily high fructose corn syrup, because actually fruit is, it's a natural form of sugar, but can be anti-inflammatory. So if you can have these natural sugars, it's when you start getting into like the candy, the ice cream, the, high fructose corn syrup, that sort of stuff. That's when we start to kind of run into issues. And you might even notice that if you, like over Christmas, for example, like if you're having, cookies and that sort of thing, a lot of people have pain flare-ups over that period of time because you are, eating these things, likely in more than moderation. So honestly, the one thing, if you had to pick one thing to avoid, because a lot of times people think like, I need to avoid this, 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 and this, and I can eat this, 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 and this, when it's really just pick one or two. Like if ice cream is your weakness, if you tend to have ice cream, after dinner every night or something like that, find something like a yogurt or find something to substitute just that and focus on just that, and then worry about everything else. If you take it one step at a time, it just makes it more of a long-term habit versus trying to change 10 different things at once. So I would say probably sugar is the first thing to start with as far as inflammatory foods go.
What about natural sugars? Date sugar, coconut sugar. Do they count under your sugar category just as well, or are they different?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on what they're in. Sometimes some sweeteners can be okay. And again, if it's in moderate, like if you just use a little bit of sugar in your coffee or something like that, that is okay. It's just when you're consistently having, like I said, ice cream after dinner, like every night, or, on the weekends, you're, I don't know, eating lots of cake or I don't know, anything like that. It's just when you're eating this stuff consistently. And that's where we kind of run into those issues.
What about what to eat?
Yes. So there's lots of things. I actually have a handout about the top 10 best anti-inflammatory foods, and I can post a link to that below with the blog. But a lot of it, honestly, so one of the biggest things is fish, to incorporate eating healthy omega-3s. Because we get a lot of omega-6s just in traditional fats and things, and I go into more detail. But like salmon, if you could incorporate salmon, tuna, there's a couple of others. But if you don't like fish, that's okay. You don't necessarily have to eat it. There are lots of other things. So like nuts and seeds are really good. Not necessarily like peanuts, but more of like the almonds, walnuts, that sort of thing. Again, healthy fats.
Why not peanuts? I like peanuts.
Peanuts just have a little bit more of like hydrogenated oils and things that aren't necessarily, they kind of flood the healthy fats and kind of make it a little bit more unhealthy. Whereas like walnuts and almonds have some more of those healthier fats and less oils, more minerals. So, I mean, again, in moderation, it's okay. And then just, I mean, green leafy vegetables. And like I always say is, I mean, around the perimeter of the grocery store kind of is where you have, all of the produce, the healthy meats, all of that kind of stuff. So kind of staying around that, getting more fresh food.
What about frozen food?
Frozen food is okay, like frozen vegetables. There are some like frozen meals that might be okay. Again, just kind of looking at the ingredients, making sure there's not all of these, preservatives or chemicals or things like that.
What about canned foods?
Canned foods are, again, okay if you're looking at kind of making sure that there's not all of these oils and all of these preservatives that are kind of complicating the benefits of them. One thing is corn can actually be inflammatory, so kind of something to keep in mind. But like some of the canned vegetables and things are good, like canned chicken, canned tuna, like those sorts of things be okay. I don't mind canned chicken a lot.
What about gluten? What about...
So gluten, it depends on if you have a sensitivity to it or not. There are some people that are much more affected by gluten than others. And it's just kind of figuring out. So one thing you can do is if you do eat a lot of gluten but are noticing a lot of pain flare-ups, just cut it out for like a week. And then you can slowly start to see if you notice any difference in your pain or notice any difference. And then you can kind of start to slowly reintroduce it and see if it makes a difference. See if your pain kind of correlates with if you're eating gluten or not, or, things like that. Because some people can eat gluten no problem, and some people have a really hard time with it.
I think it's the same thing with dairy. Some people
Yes.
digest it well, some people don't.
Yeah. And it's all kind of about just finding what things work for you. And because there's not necessarily like a blueprint of eat this, 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 and this, and you won't ever have pain. It just kind of depends on what you like, what you can easily incorporate into your diet, and what agrees with you. I mean, it's very simple, and a lot of times we try to make it way too complex, like with meal plans and all this stuff. Like, you don't necessarily need that unless you like actually enjoy, I have a lot of people who do enjoy having a specific plan and things, but you want to have the freedom because you want this to be a long-term thing. You don't want it to be, 3 months and then you're kind of off the track again. You want to make this a long-term habit.
Cool. Anything else you want to share? Anything else you think it's important to know in regards to, and can you tell us a little bit about how you work when you work online? Because my audience is kind of all over the US.
Yeah. So I'm primarily based in Sandy, Utah. So the people that are around me in Sandy, Cottonwood, Draper, I do go to their homes and do in-person visits. If you're not in Utah, we can also do virtual session. So it's kind of the same thing. And there's a lot of people that are like, well, how do you do physical therapy virtually? And it's totally feasible. I primarily focus on movement anyways. And so I don't do a ton of hands-on massage type stuff. I usually refer to my massage therapist for that. So it's primarily finding pain-free movement. And that's my ultimate goal, especially when we start out, because it exists. And then we take that pain-free movement and we run with it and we progress from there. So it can totally be done virtually. I have a couple of virtual clients now, definitely helping with accountability and things like that. So we can work one-on-one virtually or in person. And I usually meet with people about once a week, sometimes twice a week, depending on kind of what we decide. I also have just some remote exercise programming for people who are like, hey, I want to start working out again. I'm dealing with XYZ, knee pain, hip pain, back pain. Can you kind of give a plan of what I can do? And that's just programming a set of exercises every day for you with video follow-up so you know exactly what to do. And then we kind of check in every now and then. So that's on a monthly basis. So we can either do one-on-one or we can do kind of that remote exercise programming if you just kind of want a plan moving forward. So there's lots of different options.
Super helpful. I used to do that. I don't do that anymore. But when I used to work one-on-one, I would record some of the class and then send it to them so that they could repeat what we did together. And so then they had the confidence that it was designed specifically for them. Yeah. And it's super, super helpful. I find that so helpful, and it makes it a little bit more affordable too sometimes, when you can work like that instead of, it depends on your level of discipline. To be honest, a lot of the times people need that accountability and need that inspiration, that just assistance. Like, it's not easy to do this stuff alone, to be honest. And if you're trying to move someone who holds a certain frequency for you and moves at that certain frequency, pun intended, then it actually, it's easy for you to follow than it is to try and like push through that resistance that and the fear that you sometimes have. And it's really a well worth it investment. So I believe that everything is connected, and I focus on mind, body, spirit. But, when you're dealing with pain, once the pain is manifested at the physical level, you have to deal with it at the physical level. And so I thank you so much for sharing everything and all of your wisdom and knowledge with us today. Anything else you want to close with?
I mean, just keep moving. I mean, it's honestly as cliche as it sounds. I mean, finding there is something out there that you, one, will enjoy, and two, that won't flare up your pain. It's just a matter of finding that and kind of using that to help you, because adventure doesn't have an age limit, and age doesn't have to dictate our function, and it doesn't have to dictate what you're able to do. So keep hope, and then we will keep striving to kind of bring hope and optimism to osteoarthritis. So keep moving. That's the number one thing. And if you need help, let me know.
Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to put the link to my group inside of the chat so that I post everywhere else. Whatever links we need to add there for the workout and for whatever else you want to share with us, you could do it on the group post.
I will add those.
Because this thing, I think it's going to post in all 3 places at once, and then they all have different comments from what I have gathered. I'm new to this StreamYard platform, so I'm just putting it here so that people know where to find us inside of the group, and then that's where you will be able to get the links to the things that we mentioned earlier. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye.
See you later.